Good morning, Marvin Sylvester here. I hope all is well with you, all is well with me. And where am I today? Today I am at the very beautiful Flower Pot Beach. It's a beach in South Trinidad, in Pointe-à-Pierre. I did not know about this beach actually. A colleague, a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, told me about this beach, and I said I had to come and check it out. And as you would have seen in the introductory videos, it's a really nice, beautiful, well kept beach. In terms of the weather, well, as you can see today, it's another bright and sunny day. Excellent weather to be out with your family. As a matter of fact, right now here I have a whole bunch of families, people swimming and having fun, doing whatever families do, right? So again, another great day to be out here in South Trinidad. So before I go on into the videos too, I want to, as usual, thank everybody who has viewed, liked, subscribed, shared, hit the notification bell for all the videos. I greatly appreciate it, as you know I always do. Thank you very much for this, and I'm very grateful. Please continue to like, share, subscribe and whatnot, right? So we want to go on to the news now. Well, the articles that stood out to me this week. So actually the first couple of articles I want to cover this week is actually a contrast between two articles in a very important topic, which is the current global financial crisis, which I see to be with all these different banks and stuff collapsing. There's a contrast between two articles, and how they are covered in terms of the subject matter experts they approach, and the details or the information that was shared in each of these articles, right? What is people saying? So the first article I want to cover, well, it's two articles. One is from the Trinidad and Tobago Newsday, the other one is from the Trinidad and Tobago Express. So the first one I want to cover is the Newsday article, right? It's a Newsday article dated the 18th of March 2023, and the title of it is Central Bank Warns of Spillover Effects of US Banking Crisis. It's an article by Ryan Hamilton Davis. Let's go into this, right? So it starts. Although there is no direct contagion effect coming out of an emerging banking crisis which resulted in 3 US banks failing, the central bank is still cautious, noting that there could still be spillover effects that could affect Trinis locally and abroad, and regulatory policy changes that could have repercussions on emerging nations such as Trinidad and Tobago. Okay. Responding to questions from Newsday, a source at the central bank said the financial system in Trinidad and Tobago was basically sound and resilient. So two things jump out to me here. The article, it draws it in by saying the central bank, right? Central bank is saying something, and it draws it in with the belief that, you know, you're going to be reading some sort of official position by the central bank, but it's not. The article is more or less covering and referencing an unnamed source, right? And as I would have mentioned in previous videos, you all know how I feel about unnamed sources, and I'm very skeptical of unnamed sources and people who don't choose to come out and identify what they're saying, especially for something as important as this, right? The second thing is the source also highlights that the Trinidad and Tobago banking sector is resilient and sound, and that's important to note, right? It's important to keep in the back of your mind as I go through this article here. Now the source goes on to say that Trinidad and Tobago is not immune from global financial risk and the local banking sector must remain vigilant. Agreed. Right? The source also talks about the fact that investors are jittery and the spillover problems from one or two banks could affect other institutions, right? But as the source explains that, from what I read in the article, very little information is then given to explain or to give any details or give any facts to support why this is being said. No, you get the bone, no meat, So for instance, in the article it states, the spillover to other economies may also be considerable. In light of the size of the US and how integrated financial markets are, central bank source warned. But exactly how? The article doesn't explain. Right? It also says, given the fact that one of the failed banks, Silicon Valley Bank, had a high exposure to the tech sector, TNT Central Bank expressed concern. Well, TNT Central Bank, I don't think this is the official position of the TNT Central Bank. It is from an unnamed source. I want to believe it probably is, but this unnamed source, who's this, right? Expressed concern over the possibility that new policies could be put in place to tighten global regulatory standards related to concentration risk, which increases when banks invest too heavily in one sector, entity, or geographical location. The source pointed out that TNT uses standards set by US financial regulators to benchmark its own regulations. And the same thing I ask, well, why this unnamed source didn't go into more detail about these things, to really explain and to give us some more background knowledge of exactly what it is they're referring to. So overall, again, my whole concern is that you have an article purporting to be the official position of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, right? But it references a unnamed source, and it takes a highly speculative approach to something that is an issue that is very critical to a lot of people, globally, and I do believe a lot of people in Trinidad and Tobago looking at this critically too, right? And also, whoever this unnamed source is, as I always like to say, people should be willing to put the name to things and come out openly and stand up by their position and to justify why it is they're saying what they're saying. And for something as important as this, not to be making all these sorts of speculative statements under the cloak of anonymity. But again, that's just my opinion, right? So I'll just be honest. I'm being honest. I know I'm being critical, but I really wasn't happy with how this article lays things out. For something as important as this, I think people should be willing to go on record. I think people should be willing to come out and say what they have to say and to justify it, right? Because, for something as important as this, we want to hear the thoughts of people who are subject matter experts, and we want to hear what you have to say. So let me contrast this now with an article from the from the Trinidad and Tobago Express, right? The Daily Express article is a Daily Express article dated the 22nd of March 2023. Dookeran wants focus on economic expansion, by Curtis Williams. So yeah, the article goes on to state within the body of it, right? The former Minister of Finance told Express Business he's not worried that the present instability in the global financial sector will negatively impact this country in the short term, and the greater challenge we face is growing inflation. Mr. Dookeran is quoted saying, "I do not see any spillover from the recent bank failures into the economy. We have some instability and uncertainty, And to be honest, we have become accustomed to living with uncertainty. But to me, the greater challenge is that of inflation, which we have to deal with, the former finance minister said. Right? And then the article goes on to continue with Mr. Dookeran's focus on the need to expand the economy, which he believes should be the priority right now. Now, I respect this kind of approach, right? You have where the article goes, it finds a subject matter expert, you know, the expert, you know, probably when asked about certain things, comes out specifically, well, Mr. Dookeran is a very esteemed son of the soil, right? Highly respected economist. They go to this expert, you put certain questions to them, and the person comes out straight and say, listen, this is what I believe is on the case, is the case, and they stand up and they justify it. So whether they believe it will have a spillover, it will not have a spillover, whatever the case might be, Mr. Dookeran puts his name to what it is he says, and he comes out and he makes his recommendations. And I respect that, as opposed to, you know, if someone wants to come out and to say certain things, they say in a source and anonymous, and you know, the impression that could be given when you say certain things in a speculative way is borderline fearmongering the people. So that was my concern there, and as I said, you could see the contrast between the two articles. You have one on name source, goes in a particular direction, one where you have a name source, it states things more clearly. And that is just my thoughts on that, right? But I want to stick with the second article for a bit, because two things stood out to me from that article. In the first instance, well, the first observation that I make from the article is one where Mr. Dookeran is talking about the need to expand the economy, and two, you also have where the article references several points from the recent IMF staff report, which is one of the things, as you all know, I was kind of saying and asking, you know, that should start to happen. People should start to really pay attention to this IMF report, right? So, I mean, if Mr. Williams is looking at my videos and he picked it up that I was saying to, you know, somebody to really start to talk more about the report, well, I take that credit. Alright, but anyway, so on the first point, or on the first observation that I got from the article where Mr. Dookeran is saying we need to expand the economy, right? I want to go straight into what Mr. Dookeran was saying about that and what it is he suggests happen, right? So I'll just go straight into the article and read it. Dookeran argued, the challenge is how do you expand the economic space as the country will continue to rely on the fortunes of the energy sector. But the former finance minister said the time has come to use multilateral lending institutions to draw down on funds to support economic expansion. There is a need to look at fiscal equation in terms of opportunities. For example, there is special drawing rights put in place by the IMF, and Trinidad could get some share of that. We need to go for it. That's one area. We need to look at opportunities for external funding of the fiscal account without increasing our debt profile. Having fund resources on the fiscal account, we can then be a little more risky. We need a real change in expanding our economic space and not just balancing the books, but balancing the book of life, Dookeran told the Business Express. He also pointed to a new window of funding being opened up by the IMF and the possibility of accessing funding or budgetary support from the United States Federal Reserves. So What am I gathering here? Here I am gathering that Mr. Dookeran is saying, well, we recently experienced a budget surplus, a small one, but Mr. Dookeran is saying we need to go further. We really need to take more. Doesn't use the word aggressive, but I'm gathering that we need to take more aggressive steps to expand the economy and not just to keep things balanced with probably balanced budgets or small surpluses. We need to get the economy moving. Okay, agreed. But I have to admit, the way in which Mr. Dookeran is suggesting, or the idea to go to organizations like the IMF and lending institutions to get funds, I have some questions about that. Now, if we have to go to the IMF, I'm not 100% sure about how these drawdowns and all these different things work. But if we have to go to the IMF, that means we have to borrow money. Because I don't think the IMF gives anybody money. Whatever the IMF gives you have to pay back. So you're going to have to borrow money. Somebody could explain it to me if I have it wrong. So we have to borrow money. And in borrowing money, you have to pay it back. And that is where my concern is, because with all the uncertainty that we're experiencing now, and Mr. Dookeran is saying that we've come to learn to live with uncertainty, and we've come to more or less to adapt to uncertainty. But this kind of uncertainty, very, very risky in my opinion. And I am not a subject matter expert, I am not an economist, but I am going to offer my opinion based on what Mr. Dookeran is suggesting. So, the first thing is, okay, we want to expand and we're going to borrow money. Now, I just trying to look at the whole picture based on the reports that I've been reading, looking on, all the articles we've been covering so far. So, the first thing we know is that regarding the central bank and its interest rate, right, that has been more or less steady since last year, I believe, right? I think it was about 3.5% or somewhere there, so that was stated in the IMF report. That has not been aggressively increased like some other countries. And that is one of the ways in which we control inflation. And I believe, or the impression I get, is that the government is not really going to be pushing the interest rate too high anytime soon. You also have, if you borrow money to create economic expansion, that means you're going to have to put money into the economy. By putting this money into the economy, it is going to create inflation, or some level of inflation, because the more money you put into the economy is the more spending that will take place, that will create some level of scarcity in certain things, and inflation is going to go up, if I understand correctly, right? And then you also have, so you have the interest rate not being adjusted too much. You have increased spending, which could lead to increased inflation. And you also have the uncertainty, where we have to speculate a little bit, where suppose you have more aggressive interest rate hikes in the US, which creates, we spoke about Mr. Arjun's article a couple of weeks ago, which creates certain spin-off effects, namely being the US dollar appreciates, it becomes expensive for other countries to buy oil and gas. They buy less oil and gas, so the price of those commodities drop. We mostly depend on energy exports for our revenues, and when the prices drop, we earn less revenue. We also know that we're not producing as much oil and gas as we used to in the past, right? And then we also, if we speculate a little bit, there are a lot of analysts that are saying that these three banks in the US and the Credit Suisse in Europe, that is just the start. They're going to have more banks that are going to collapse, and then there could be a major situation happening in the US economy. And as we know, if something really major happens in the US economy, it will affect us here. How, I cannot say, but it will. It will, right? So when you put all those points together, and we now have to repay these funds back to the IMF, and that is where, to me, the whole thing seems a little bit risky. And that's where I am wondering if us going to the IMF at this point in time to borrow more money is the way that we should be going to address the need to expand the economy. And that, again, like I say, feel free to correct me, feel free to explain things to me, but I'm not sure if that is the best way to go. So I was just thinking, in my layman's mind, what is the best way to get the economic expansion going without having to borrow, or if you have to borrow, extremely little bit. And I was thinking if there was some sort of way in which to organically expand the economy, things that we could just do here locally to support that. And one of the things that I came up with was the certain things with the IT sector and entertainment sector. So that leads me into this next article, which is the government moves to develop national manpower plan by Leah Sorayas. Now, this national manpower plan that they're supposed to be doing to find out about the manpower and the skills and everything that the government should be developing, I think is the right direction. And I think it ties back into what I was saying earlier about us trying to find ways to locally, organically grow the economy without borrowing very, very little. And that would have led me to probably thinking the solution of aggressively pursuing remote IT jobs, the expansion of those kind of jobs here in Trinidad and Tobago, where you attract a lot of these companies like call centers and different big companies that would have support centers and stuff, and you get those people to come and set up call centers or IT support centers here in Trinidad to support especially Western markets. Why I say that and why it is I think it could work? Well, one, we here speak English. Western market is English, and then in terms of time zone, we would be well suited with the US Latin America time zone, as well as we just about 4 to 5 hours behind Europe, depending on which country you're talking about. So you have the language barrier sorted and you have the time zone barrier sorted. And I think, that is one of the things we could use to try to grow the economy organically, if that is a good word to use. And then you have your national manpower plan, where you start promoting skills to support that direction, where people could work remotely, less gas spending, less moving about, less traffic, all these different things. It have a whole lot of benefits to push in that direction. And then also, my other suggestion was, I'm thinking, is to really push to develop the entertainment, cultural art sector, right? Those societies, those people who engage in those things, where we could have more bigger events on the calendar to attract more tourists. We already have Carnival here in Trinidad. I see Tobago trying to push a carnival there too, but there's a whole big gap in between, you know, between February and sometime later in the year for Tobago Carnival. So I'm just thinking, we get these kind of things going, it would help us to expand without having to lean on too much foreign assistance. That is just my thoughts on that. So the second observation from the article was that, as I said, we had the recent IMF staff visit, and I was saying, you know, I was hoping to see more discussion about it with subject matter experts and in the media. And the author goes through several points of the IMF report and links it back to what Mr. Dookeran is saying. And overall, I just wanted to say kudos to the author. I think that was a good way of highlighting the points and providing more context. And me personally, I still believe that, or would like to see more people talk about this report, more people analyze it and give their thoughts on it, because this report is something that's going to be used, is going to be used by the government to influence future policies and decisions. So we see it, you know, being done in this article here, and I'm hoping to see it done more in the future. That's my thoughts. Right? So you want to cover this article here, which, well, my last article, which is a Daily Express article dated the 22nd of the 3rd, 2023. US predicts continued strong LNG demand by Curtis Williams. So I'll go straight into the article and I'll give my thoughts after. Right? So I'll jump straight into it. The article goes, the United States Energy Information Agency, USEIA, is predicting that increased global demand for liquefied natural gas will lead to higher domestic natural gas production between 2023 and 2050 in the US, right? In its latest annual energy outlook, USEIA said while production and export of natural gas will increase, it is expecting a reduction in US demand for the commodity as renewables displace a lot of fossil fuel in power generation sector. The annual report predicts US natural gas production increases by 15% from 2022 to 2050, and consumption decreases by 6% from its peak in 2022. It added, in some cases, exports to satisfy growing international demand for natural gas encourage growth in domestic natural gas production. A significant portion of production growth is due to liquefied natural gas export demand, which drives overall increase in natural gas exports. Straightforward. This information is likely to be crucial to TNT, which has the potential to continue to earn significant revenue from the export of LNG if it is able to bring to market natural gas to satisfy its installed LNG capacity. You're always talking about this. The growth in LNG is driven by the structural change in the natural gas market in Europe, with Western countries moving away from the reliance on Russian gas to securing LNG supplies, as well as the change out in Asia from coal in order to meet improved environmental standards. And from this article, we see three things, and I agree with it to some point, but I also have a divergent view from it. You see three things, right? One, we see LNG prices will arguably remain low in the US for a while to come. And what do I mean by that? Well, as we've said many times on this channel, the more of any one commodity it have, the more the price will drop. So the more the price drops, it's not good for us. And if production in the US is expected to continue growing, while demand keeps going down, and I would have also explained that in a past video where I would have explained the heating degree days, the amount of energy needed during the colder periods of the year in the US and Europe and these places is going down, right? And their production is going up according to the report. That means prices will stay low. So what we see in the Henry Hub is going to more or less stay there, the $2.70 per MMBTU, and I've seen it drop much lower. I think a few days ago I saw it drop to almost $2 per MMBTU. The price of LNG is going to remain very low now and into the future. So we need to keep that in mind, you know, when we see in budgets and all these things being passed, right? The second observation, or the second thing that comes to mind from this article, is the EU cartel, the EU buyers cartel that I would have mentioned before. Now, in the US, they're saying that they are using a lot of their LNG to support exports. And I want to believe a lot of their exports is going to Europe to meet the demand there now that they've cut out Russia. So you have the US that's going to be sending large quantities of LNG to Europe. And then you have this cartel on top of that, where, as I was sharing a couple weeks ago, I think it's like about 50 companies supposed to be coming together to start signing contracts in June of this year. And as I explained in my video, with a tendering process, people are not going to be running in there to try and sell things at the highest price. They're going to be running in there to try and sell things at the lowest price possible to win the tender. So if that happens, with the US also sending in a whole bunch of gas there, I don't see the EU being one of the places where we're going to get a good premium for our LNG from Trinidad and Tobago. I don't see that happening. So two places. We're seeing in the US prices going to remain low, and if this cartel picks up the way it expects to pick up, prices in Europe going to be very low. Or in order to compete in Europe, you're going to have to keep your prices low. That is what it is I am seeing. And if we're going to increase production, we increase in production to go to sell at a low price? No. So remember last week, and I believe it was, I would have covered an article where this, you know, it was being said that we need to push to support Asian market. And I believe that is where the future for Trinidad and Tobago's LNG should be focused, because that is the market where the price is high or relatively high based on certain reports I've read, and we need to increase our production and get our gas to Asia, and quickly. The only thing that I am seeing, or the only impression I am getting, is how we going to do that. Because I've been watching, you know, and following Mr. Young's visits to the US, and he's talking to a lot of the big US companies, the Shells, the BPs, the can't remember all the names, but I remember he was talking to a lot of these people. But I don't know if he's speaking specifically to the Asian markets. And that is my only real wonder and concern. Because if that is where we need to go to get the best premium for our gas, well, the minister needs to start beating the road to talk to more Asian organizations that receive LNG. And correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't seen much of that, but if it is happening, all well and good. And that would be more or less the articles that I have to cover this week. Short video this week. Again, if you like this video, if you like what it is you're putting out, you like what it is you're doing, I would please encourage you to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Please help to get the word out on what it is we're trying to do here. Also, if you've really enjoyed this video and you want to provide further support, there will be a link to my Buy Me a Coffee in the description for this video. Also, all the articles that I mentioned will be in the description of this video. And only one more thing that remains for me to say, which is to keep informed, stay vigilant, and be prepared. I hope you have a wonderful day. Hope you have a whenever you see this video, hope you have a wonderful week ahead. And please keep good. Bye bye.